Taman Park pressed his face against the transport shuttle's window, watching the Galactic Academy station grow larger with each passing second. The massive ring structure stretched across the darkness of space like a silver crown, dotted with thousands of lights that blinked in patterns he didn't understand. Ships of every imaginable shape docked along its outer rim, some sleek and organic-looking, others geometric and crystalline. His shuttle was the smallest vessel in sight. He sat back and took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. 23 years old, fresh out of Earth's training program, and he was about to become the first human to study at the most prestigious institution in the galaxy. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on his shoulders like a physical thing. Every choice he made here would reflect on his entire species. The shuttle shuddered as it entered the docking sequence. Through the speakers, an automated voice spoke in perfect English, though Taman knew it was simultaneously broadcasting in thousands of other languages. Welcome to Galactic Academy Station. Please remain seated until atmospheric equalization is complete. The airlock opened with a hiss. Taman grabbed his single bag and stepped into the station corridor. The gravity felt slightly different, lighter than Earth's, making each step feel bouncy. The walls were made of some smooth material that seemed to glow from within, casting everything in a soft blue light. Aliens of every description moved through the corridor, barely glancing at him as they passed. A being made entirely of floating geometric shapes drifted by. A creature with 6 legs and what looked like feathers instead of skin hurried past, clutching a data tablet. Taman! A familiar voice cut through the noise. A young woman pushed through the crowd, waving. Hana Kim had arrived at the station 2 weeks earlier to prepare support facilities for the human students. She looked tired but excited. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. They hugged briefly. "How was the journey?" she asked, taking his bag. "Long," Taman admitted. 3 weeks in cryo-sleep makes everything feel weird. "You'll adjust," Hana said, leading him down the corridor. "I need to warn you about something, though. The other species here, they don't exactly think highly of humans. We're kind of a joke to them." Taman frowned. "What do you mean?" "We're the newest species to achieve spaceflight," Hana explained. "Most of these civilizations have been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years. Some for millions. To them, we're babies, primitives. They're polite about it, mostly, but you'll hear comments. Just ignore them." They walked through a series of corridors, each one larger and more impressive than the last. Finally, they emerged into a massive central hub. Taman stopped and stared. The space was enormous, easily a kilometer across, with multiple levels connected by floating platforms that seemed to defy gravity. Hundreds of aliens moved through the area, their conversations creating a constant buzz of sound. "Orientation is in an hour," Hana said. "I'll show you to your quarters first." The room assigned to Taman was small but comfortable, with a bed that adjusted to his body shape and a window looking out into space. He changed into the academy uniform, a simple dark blue jumpsuit that fit perfectly despite never being measured for it. Apparently, the station's scanners had sized him automatically when he entered. The orientation assembly was held in an amphitheater that could have held thousands. Taman and Hana found seats near the back, surrounded by alien students of every description. He tried not to stare at a being whose head appeared to be made of living crystal, or another whose body constantly shifted between solid and liquid states. Dean Quarath entered the stage, and the room fell silent. The Dean was tall and thin, with skin that reflected light like oil on water. His species, Taman had learned, was called the Prismatics, and they were known for their diplomatic skills and ancient wisdom. "Welcome, students, to a new cycle at Galactic Academy." The Dean's voice somehow filled the entire space without seeming loud. "You represent the finest minds from across the galaxy. Here, you will study sciences that shape civilizations and forge bonds that will last lifetimes." The Dean went through the usual administrative announcements, then began introducing notable new students. When he reached Taman's name, there was a pause. "We also welcome Taman Park of Earth," the Dean said carefully. The first of his species to join our institution. A ripple of whispers spread through the audience. Taman felt his face grow hot. Some of the whispers sounded curious, but others carried a tone of amusement. Hana squeezed his hand supportively. The first few days passed in a blur of classes and orientations. Taman found the coursework challenging, but manageable. His fellow students were mostly indifferent to him, though a few were openly friendly. One of them was Remek, a Thelosian with 4 arms and bright orange skin, who sat next to Taman in their quantum mechanics class. "Your people only discovered quantum physics a century ago?" Remek asked during a break, his large eyes blinking with genuine curiosity. "About that, yes," Taman confirmed. "Fascinating," Remek said. "My species has known about it for 8,000 years, and I still find it confusing. You must be very clever to catch up so quickly." It was the first genuinely kind thing anyone had said to him since arriving. Taman smiled. "Thanks. I think we're just stubborn." The real trouble started in xenobiology class. The instructor was Velthara, a silicoid whose body looked like living diamond shaped into a vaguely humanoid form. She moved with a clicking sound, each step precise and measured. "Today we will examine the biological diversity of carbon-based life forms," Velthara announced. "A category that includes many primitive species still struggling with basic stellar travel." A holographic display appeared above her desk, showing anatomical diagrams of various species. When the human diagram appeared, several students laughed. "Note the human's singular cardiovascular pump," Velthara said, pointing at the heart. "Unlike more advanced species with redundant systems, a failure of this single organ results in death. Their neural processing occurs at speeds we would consider glacial. They require a remarkably narrow range of atmospheric composition and temperature to survive. Their cellular repair mechanisms are crude compared to most spacefaring species." Taman kept his expression neutral. But inside, he felt anger building. She wasn't technically wrong, but the way she presented the information made humans sound like they had barely crawled out of caves. "And yet," Velthara continued, "they somehow achieved spaceflight. A reminder that even the most inefficient biological systems can occasionally produce results, given enough time." After class, Remek approached Taman apologetically. "She's like that with everyone," he said. "Last week, she spent an entire lecture explaining why my species has redundant limbs." "It's fine," Taman said, though it wasn't. "I'm used to being underestimated." The next day, all new students were required to undergo biological scanning. It was a standard procedure, Hana explained. The academy needed complete medical profiles for every student to ensure they could respond to health emergencies. Taman stood in line outside the medical bay with dozens of other new students. One by one, they entered the scanning chamber, stayed for a few minutes, then left. The process seemed routine and boring. When his turn came, Taman stepped into a circular room dominated by a large cylindrical device covered in glowing panels. A medical technician, whose species Taman didn't recognize, gestured for him to stand in the center. "This will take approximately 3 minutes," the technician said. "Stand still and breathe normally." The cylinder began to glow. Taman stood as still as he could, feeling a strange tingling sensation across his skin. Then the machine made a sound he hadn't heard it make with any other student. A sharp, high-pitched whine that quickly grew louder. The lights on the panels began flashing red. The technician's expression changed from bored to concerned. The whine became a scream, and then, with a sound like shattering glass, the entire scanner went dark. Emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in red. The technician stared at Taman, then at the dead machine, then back at Taman. "What did you do?" the technician asked. "Nothing," Taman said, genuinely confused. "I just stood here like you said." More technicians rushed into the room. They ran diagnostics, checked connections, argued in languages Taman didn't understand. Finally, they decided to try a backup scanner in another room. The same thing happened. The moment the scan began, the machine whined, flashed, and died. By the end of the day, Taman had broken 5 different scanning devices. Word had spread through the academy like wildfire. The primitive human had somehow destroyed technology that had successfully scanned millions of species across thousands of years. That evening, Taman sat in his quarters, staring out at the stars. His communicator buzzed constantly with messages, but he ignored them. He had come here to prove that humans belonged among the stars. Instead, on his 4th day, he had become a laughingstock. There was a knock on his door. When he opened it, Hana and Remek stood outside. "Everyone's talking about what happened," Hana said quietly. "I know," Taman said. "They're saying you're too primitive to even be measured properly," Remek added, then quickly continued. "But I don't think that's what happened. I've been thinking about it. Those scanners work on quantum bioresonance principles. They've never failed before. Not once. What if they didn't fail because they couldn't read you? What if something else is going on?" Taman looked at his new friend, seeing genuine concern and curiosity there instead of mockery. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I guess we're going to find out." The medical bay of the Galactic Academy looked more like a cathedral than a hospital. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and soft blue light emanated from walls covered in displays showing data in dozens of alien languages. Chief Medical Officer Sarnash stood before a holographic projection of the broken scanner, his bioelectric body crackling with visible frustration. "Explain to me," Sarnash said slowly, "how a first-year student managed to destroy 5 scanning devices in a single afternoon." Taman stood at attention, flanked by 2 medical technicians. Behind them, Dr. Yunho Choi, the human physician assigned to the academy, watched with his arms crossed. He had arrived at the station only 3 months ago, and still seemed uncomfortable with the sheer alienness of everything. "I don't know, sir," Taman said. "I did exactly what the technicians told me to do." Sarnash's energy field pulsed in a pattern that Taman had learned meant annoyance. "These scanners have processed over 10 million biological profiles from every corner of known space. They have never failed. Not once. Until yesterday. Perhaps the equipment has reached the end of its service life," Dr. Choi suggested diplomatically. "The equipment," Sarnash said coldly, "was manufactured 20 years ago and is rated for 500 years of continuous operation. The probability of simultaneous failure across 5 independent units is mathematically insignificant." He turned to Taman. "We will try again. This time with our most advanced scanner, in a controlled environment with full monitoring." The advanced medical chamber was located 3 levels below the main bay, in a section of the station reserved for sensitive research. The walls here were darker, the atmosphere more serious. The scanner itself was twice the size of the previous ones, a massive cylinder covered in what looked like organic circuitry that pulsed with its own light. A dozen medical personnel and researchers had gathered to observe. Taman noticed Velthara among them, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's light in rainbow patterns. She stood with her arms crossed in what he had learned was the silicoid version of a smug expression. "This device," Sarnash explained, "can map a biological entity down to the quantum state of individual molecules. It has successfully scanned beings made of pure energy, hive minds, comprising millions of individual organisms, and even silicon-based life forms whose biology operates on completely different principles than carbon-based life." "No pressure then," Taman muttered. Dr. Choi placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just relax. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out." Taman stepped into the scanning chamber. The cylinder closed around him with a gentle hum. Through the transparent material, he could see the observers watching him like scientists studying a particularly interesting specimen. He tried not to think about it. The scan began. Taman felt the same tingling sensation as before, but this time it was stronger, almost uncomfortable. The air inside the cylinder seemed to vibrate. The organic circuitry on the walls began glowing brighter, patterns of light racing across its surface faster and faster. Outside, the technicians monitored their displays with growing confusion. One of them called out numbers that meant nothing to Taman. Another gestured frantically at a screen. The humming grew louder. the light brighter. Taemin's skin began to feel hot. He was about to call out when the entire machine suddenly went dark, with a sound like a thunderclap. Emergency lights activated, and the cylinder opened, releasing him. He stumbled out, breathing hard. The room smelled like burned electronics. Smoke rose from several panels on the scanner. Sarnash stared at the ruined machine, his bioelectric field pulsing erratically. "Impossible," he whispered. Velthara's voice cut through the shocked silence. "Not impossible. Simply proof that human biology is too chaotic and primitive for our instruments to comprehend. Perhaps they should not be here at all." Several observers murmured agreement. Taemin felt his face burn with embarrassment and anger. "With respect, Doctor," Choi said firmly, "that explanation makes no sense. These scanners work on universal principles of biology. If they can map energy beings, they should have no problem with a human. Unless," Velthara said sweetly, "humans are somehow exempt from universal principles, which would make them either miraculous or aberrant. I know which I believe." The meeting broke up shortly after. Taemin returned to his quarters, feeling defeated. He had been at the academy less than a week, and already he was a problem that needed solving. Maybe Velthara was right. Maybe humans didn't belong here. He was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling, when Hana burst through his door without knocking. "You need to come with me," she said urgently. Now, she led him through empty corridors to the engineering wing. It was late in the station's cycle, and most students were either in their quarters or at the recreational facilities. Hana moved quickly, checking around corners before proceeding. "Where are we going?" Taemin asked. "You'll see." They arrived at a small laboratory. Inside, a young woman hunched over a holographic display, her fingers moving through the data with practiced ease. She looked up when they entered, pushing her glasses up her nose. "This is Jiwon Lee," Hana said. "She's an engineering student, specializes in quantum systems." "I heard what happened in medical today," Jiwon said without preamble. "So I accessed the technical logs from all the scanners you broke. Is that allowed?" Taemin asked. "Probably not," Jiwon admitted. "But I wanted to see something. Look at this." She pulled up a stream of data on the display. To Taemin, it looked like meaningless numbers and graphs, but Jiwon pointed at specific sections with obvious excitement. "These are the processing loads from each scanner during your scans. See this baseline?" She indicated a flat line. "That's normal operation. And this," she pointed at another line that spiked sharply upward, "is when you entered the chamber." "So I overloaded them?" Taemin asked. "Not exactly. Watch what happens as the scan progresses." Jiwon expanded the timeline. The line didn't just spike and drop. It climbed steadily, accelerating as it went, until it shot straight up off the scale. "The scanners didn't fail because they couldn't read you. They failed because they couldn't stop reading you." Taemin frowned. "I don't understand." "The scanners work by analyzing biological data at the quantum level," Jiwon explained. "For most species, there's a finite amount of data to process." The amount of data kept increasing exponentially, like the machine was finding more and more layers to analyze, and each layer was more complex than the last. "That's impossible," Hana said. "Isn't it?" "That's what I thought," Jiwon said. "But look at the data. It's right here. Your body, Taemin, is generating quantum-level biological information at volumes that exceed the processing capacity of the most advanced scanners in the galaxy." The three of them stood in silence for a moment, processing this. "So what does that mean?" Taemin finally asked. "I have no idea," Jiwon admitted. "But it means you're not primitive. It means you're something they've never seen before." The next morning, Dean Quorath called an emergency faculty meeting. Taemin wasn't invited, but Remek, who had connections throughout the academy, kept him updated via messages. The faculty was divided. Some wanted to expel Taemin as a safety risk. Others wanted to study him extensively. A few suggested quarantining all humans until they understood what was happening. The debate grew heated. Professor Kiran, an ancient thought-weaver known for her revolutionary work in evolutionary biology, finally spoke. She was old even by her species' standards, her telepathic abilities so refined she rarely needed to speak aloud. When she did, everyone listened. "We are asking the wrong questions," Kieran said, her voice like wind through leaves. "We assume our technology is the standard, that if it cannot measure something, that something must be flawed. But perhaps our technology is incomplete. Perhaps we have never encountered biology like this, because we stopped looking for it millennia ago." "What are you suggesting?" Velthara asked stiffly. "I am suggesting," Kieran said, "that we approach this as scientists, not as judges. The human is an anomaly. Anomalies are how we make discoveries," the dean agreed. A research team would be formed to study human biology using non-invasive methods. Taman would continue his studies, but would also participate in voluntary research sessions. When Taman was informed of the decision, he didn't know whether to feel relieved or worried. He was being allowed to stay, but he was also now officially a scientific curiosity. That evening, he sat with Hana, Jiwan, and Remek in the Academy's observation deck, watching ships come and go from the station. "I just wanted to study," Taman said quietly. "I didn't ask to be special. None of us ask for it," Remek said. "But sometimes, the galaxy has other plans. My species was discovered when one of our ships accidentally flew into a diplomatic summit. We went from unknown to galactic citizens in a single day. It was terrifying." "At least you didn't break everything you touched," Taman said. "You didn't break anything," Jiwan corrected. "You revealed a limitation in their technology. That's different." "She's right," Hana added. "And honestly, I'm glad. They've been looking down on humans since we got here. Maybe this will make them think twice." Taman wanted to believe that. But as he watched a massive alien vessel dock at the station, its technology so advanced it might as well be magic, he couldn't help but feel small. Whatever was happening with his biology, it was beyond his understanding. Deep in the research levels below, Professor Kieran studied the scanner data with interest. She had seen many things in her long life, had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. But this was something new. The human's biological complexity suggested evolutionary pressures unlike anything in the galactic database. She pulled up Earth's planetary data. High gravity compared to most inhabited worlds. Intense radiation from a remarkably active star. Extreme climate variations. A dizzying array of aggressive pathogens. And humans had not just survived there. They had thrived. Kieran's telepathic sense tingled with the feeling she got when approaching a great truth. The galaxy had become comfortable, predictable. Most spacefaring species had evolved on gentle worlds, or had used technology to smooth away the rough edges of existence. But humans had done something different. They had adapted. And perhaps, Kieran thought, they were still adapting. She began drafting a research proposal, her mind racing with possibilities. If she was right, the galaxy's understanding of biology was about to change forever. And it would all start with one confused young man who couldn't be scanned. The research laboratory was located in a part of the station Taman had never seen before. Security checkpoints lined the corridors, and the walls were made of materials that seemed to absorb sound, making everything feel muffled and distant. Professor Kieran waited for him at the entrance, her ancient form seeming almost fragile in the harsh white light. "Thank you for volunteering," she said, her voice carrying directly into his mind. Taman had gotten used to her telepathy over the past week, though it still felt strange. "Did I have a choice?" he asked, not unkindly. A ripple that might have been amusement passed through Kieran's consciousness. "There is always a choice. But I am glad you made this one. Read." Inside, the laboratory was surprisingly comfortable. Instead of the sterile medical equipment he expected, there were soft chairs, plants that looked almost Earth-like, and windows showing a peaceful view of nearby nebulae. Several researchers worked at stations around the room's perimeter. "We will not scan you," Kieran explained. "Instead, We will observe, measure indirectly, study what your biology does, rather than trying to map what it is. Over the following weeks, Taman became a regular fixture in the laboratory. They tested his responses to different stimuli, measured his cellular activity through external sensors, analyzed samples of his blood and tissue using techniques that didn't require the quantum scanners. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. Dr. Choi worked closely with the research team, translating between human medical knowledge and galactic science. One afternoon, he called Taman into a private meeting. Professor Kiran was there, along with Jiwan, who had been brought onto the team as a technical consultant. "We've found something," Dr. Choi said without preamble. He pulled up a holographic display of a DNA strand. "This is your genetic code. Now, every species has what we call non-coding DNA, sequences that don't directly produce proteins. Most species have very little of it, maybe 5 to 10% of their total genome. Humans," Kiran continued, "have over 90% non-coding DNA. For decades, your scientists called it junk DNA because they couldn't determine its function." "It's not junk," Jiwan said excitedly. "We ran quantum state analysis on the samples. The non-coding sequences are quantum entangled at the molecular level. They form a biological processing network that exists in superposition." Taman stared at them blankly. "In simple terms," Dr. Choi smiled, "your DNA is a quantum computer, and it's running calculations constantly, at every level of your biology. That's why the scanners couldn't process you. They were trying to map a system that exists in multiple quantum states simultaneously." "But why?" Taman asked. "Why would humans evolve like this?" Professor Kiran pulled up Earth's planetary data. "Your world is classified as a death world by galactic standards. High gravity, dangerous radiation levels, extreme temperature variations, aggressive pathogens, unpredictable climate. Most species that evolved intelligence did so on what you would call paradise worlds. Stable climates, low radiation, gentle gravity. Earth tried to kill you at every turn," Dr. Choi added. "So, your ancestors evolved biological systems with massive redundancy and adaptability. Your immune system doesn't just fight diseases. It learns and adapts in real time. Your cells have repair mechanisms that can handle damage from radiation, toxins, and physical trauma. Your neuroplasticity allows your brain to rewire itself constantly. Most species simplified their biology through evolution," Kiran said. "They became efficient, specialized, optimized for their environments. Humans did the opposite. You became complex, redundant, adaptable." Taman sat back, trying to process this. "So we're not primitive?" "You're the opposite of primitive," Jiwan said. "You're hyper-advanced, just in a direction nobody else went. The galaxy's technology is based on the assumption that biology becomes simpler as it advances. You're proof that assumption is wrong." The news spread through the academy like wildfire, but not everyone was convinced. A researcher named Thanak, a Chronosian physicist known for his skepticism, published a paper arguing that the findings were exaggerated or misinterpreted. Several faculty members agreed with him, including Velthara. The debate created tension throughout the station. Students took sides. Some found the human biology fascinating. Others saw it as threatening, or simply refused to believe it. Taman tried to ignore the politics and focus on his studies, but it was impossible to escape the constant attention. Security Chief Mireille Song called him to her office one afternoon. She was a stern woman who had served in Earth's military before joining the diplomatic corps. Her office was sparse and practical, with weapons and security equipment neatly organized on the walls. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair. "We need to talk about the research." 18. "What about it?" Taman asked. "There are factions here that want to use what they've learned about human biology," Mireille said bluntly. "Some want to replicate it. Others want to weaponize it. And some want to ensure it never spreads beyond Earth. The galactic political situation is more complicated than you realize. I'm just a student, Taman protested. You stopped being just a student the moment you broke that first scanner, Mireille said. Now, you're a diplomatic incident, waiting to happen. I'm not saying you should stop cooperating with the research, but you need to be aware that everything discovered about you will have political implications. That night, Taman couldn't sleep. He lay in his quarters, thinking about Mireille's warning. He had come to the Academy to learn, to prove humans could contribute to galactic civilization. Instead, he had become a source of controversy and political maneuvering. His communicator buzzed. It was Remek, asking him to come to the observation deck. When Taman arrived, he found not just Remek, but also Hana and Jiwon waiting for him. We heard about your meeting with Chief Song, Hana said. We wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine, Taman said automatically. You're not, Remek said gently. And that's okay. This is a lot to handle. They sat together in silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Jiwon spoke up. For what it's worth, I think what they discovered about human biology is amazing. My people have been spacefaring for 6,000 years, and we've never encountered anything like it. You should be proud. I didn't do anything, Taman said. I just happened to be born human. That's enough, Hana said. That's always been enough. The research continued. Professor Kiran assembled a larger team, including specialists from across the galaxy. They studied not just Taman but also the other humans at the station, finding similar patterns in each of them. The quantum biological architecture was consistent across all of humanity. One breakthrough came when they tested human immune responses. They exposed tissue samples to various pathogens and toxins while monitoring the cellular activity. What they observed shocked them. The cells are adapting in real time, one researcher reported during a meeting. Not just fighting the pathogen, but rewriting their own defensive protocols to counter it more effectively. I've never seen anything like it. It's like they're learning, another added. At a cellular level, constantly updating their responses based on new threats. Professor Kiran synthesized all the findings into a comprehensive report. She presented it to the full faculty in the Academy's grand lecture hall. The room was packed, with attendance far exceeding normal faculty meetings. Even the dean stood in the back, watching with interest. Humanity, Kiran began, represents a unique evolutionary path. Where most spacefaring species optimized for efficiency, humans optimized for survival. Their biology operates on principles of redundancy, adaptability, and quantum-level processing that we have never observed in nature. She displayed graphs and data showing the complexity of human cellular mechanics, neural plasticity, and immune responses. With each revelation, the murmuring in the audience grew louder. Their DNA contains quantum-entangled sequences that allow for biological computation at scales we cannot yet measure. Their cells can enter states of accelerated repair and adaptation in response to damage. Their brains can rewire themselves throughout their entire lifespan. They are, in essence, biological systems designed to survive anything. Velthara stood up. This is speculation. We have no proof that these features provide any real advantage, don't we? Kiran replied calmly. Humanity went from primitive agriculture to spaceflight in less than 10,000 years. Most species take 100,000 years or more. They did so while living on a world that actively tried to kill them. I would call that proof. The debate that followed lasted hours. By the end, no consensus had been reached, but the tone had shifted. Humans were no longer dismissed as primitive. They were now a mystery that demanded explanation. Late that night, an emergency alert went out across the station. A mining colony in a nearby system had suffered a catastrophic failure of its environmental systems. The conditions on the surface had become lethal to all known species in the sector. Rescue attempts were deemed impossible. Taman was in the common area with his friends when the news broke. They watched the reports in silence, seeing the desperate messages from the trapped miners, the failed rescue attempts, the grim calculations of how long the survivors could last in their emergency shelters. Someone should do something, Hana said quietly. Taemin stood up. I will. They all turned to stare at him. What are you talking about? Jiwon asked. I'm human, Taemin said. If what they discovered is true, if our biology is really that adaptable, maybe I can survive conditions that would kill other species. Maybe I can help. That's insane, Hana protested. You're not a rescue specialist. You're a student. I'm a human, Taemin repeated. And right now, that might be exactly what those miners need. He walked toward the dean's office, his friends following behind, arguing with him, trying to talk him out of it. But Taemin's mind was made up. For weeks, he had been treated as an object of study, a curiosity, a problem to be solved. Now he had a chance to actually use whatever made him different to help people. It was time to find out what humans were really capable of. The Academy Council chamber was circular, with seats arranged in ascending tiers around a central platform. Dean Kuorath stood at the center, his prismatic skin reflecting the emergency lighting in rainbow patterns. Around him, faculty members and department heads argued in a dozen languages, their voices creating a chaos of sound. Taemin stood at the edge of the platform, waiting to be acknowledged. Behind him, Professor Kiran placed a gentle telepathic touch on his mind, a gesture of support. Silence. The dean's voice cut through the noise. The room fell quiet. We will address this proposal in an orderly fashion. Taemin Park. Explain your reasoning. Taemin took a breath. Public speaking had never been his strength, but he forced himself to stand straight and speak clearly. The mining colony on Korath 7 has approximately 47 beings trapped in failing emergency shelters. Every rescue team sent has been forced back by conditions on the surface. Radiation levels are lethal. The atmosphere is toxic. Temperature fluctuations are extreme. We are aware of the situation, Velthara said coldly. It is a tragedy, but one beyond our capacity to address. Not beyond mine, Taemin said. The research has shown that human biology can handle extreme conditions better than most species. I want to try. A murmur ran through the assembled faculty. One of the council members, a gas being whose name Taemin couldn't pronounce, spoke up. You are a first-year student with no rescue training. This is not a matter of biology alone. I'm volunteering, Taemin said. Thanak, the skeptical physicist, stood up. This is foolishness. The research findings are preliminary at best. Sending a student into a lethal environment based on untested hypotheses is irresponsible. The alternative is letting those miners die, Doctor, Choi said from his seat. The human biology we've documented shows remarkable resilience. It's not a guarantee, but it's a chance. That's more than those miners have right now. 1. Professor Kiran stepped forward. I support this mission, not because I believe young Taemin is invulnerable, but because the data suggests he has a genuine possibility of survival where others would have none. We have spent weeks studying humanity from a distance. Perhaps it is time to see what they can actually do. The debate continued for another hour. Security Chief Mireille Song added her voice in support, offering to coordinate the mission personally. Captain Do-Yun Kang, commander of the Academy's fastest response vessel, the Times Horizon's Edge *, volunteered his ship and crew. Finally, Dean Kuorath called for a vote. The result was narrow, but it passed. Taemin would be allowed to attempt the rescue, with strict conditions and monitoring. As the council dispersed, Hana grabbed Taemin's arm. Are you sure about this? No, Taemin admitted. But I have to try. Then I'm coming with you, said a voice from behind them. They turned to find a young woman in a medical uniform. She had the same determined expression as Taemin, and he recognized her immediately. Suman? he said, shocked. His cousin had arrived at the station only a week ago, a medical student assigned to Dr. Choi's team. Absolutely not. I'm a qualified field medic, Suman said firmly. If you're going into a disaster zone, you'll need medical support. And I'd rather it be me than someone who's never treated a human before. Before Taemin could argue, Ji-won stepped forward. I'm coming too. If the environmental suits need modification or the equipment malfunctions, you'll need an engineer who understands both human physiology and alien technology. This is getting ridiculous, Taemin said. You started it, Hana pointed out. And yes, I'm coming too. Communications and coordination. Someone needs to make sure you all stay in contact with the ship. Rimek approached hesitantly. I know I'm not human, and I don't have any special skills for this, but I'd like to help if I can. Taemin looked at his friends, feeling a surge of emotion he couldn't quite name. You all know this is dangerous, right? Of course, Rimek said. That's why we're coming. You shouldn't face danger alone. The Times Horizon's Edge Times departed the Academy 12 hours later. The ship was sleek and fast, designed for rapid response to emergencies. Captain Kang ran a tight operation, his crew moving with practiced efficiency. The journey to Korath 7 took 18 hours. During that time, Sumin ran continuous medical scans on Taemin, establishing baseline readings for his biology under normal conditions. Ji-won worked with the ship's engineers to modify an environmental suit for human use, adding extra protection in the areas the research suggested were most vulnerable. Hana coordinated with the mining colony's emergency broadcasts, gathering information about the survivors' locations and conditions. Rimek, despite having no official role, made himself useful by assisting everyone and keeping morale up. Taemin spent most of the journey studying maps of the colony and reviewing emergency rescue protocols. He tried not to think about the fact that he had never done anything like this before, that he was gambling his life on research that was barely a month old. They emerged from faster-than-light travel within sight of Korath 7. The planet was a brown and red sphere, scarred by volcanic activity. The mining colony sat on the surface like a metal growth, most of it now dark and lifeless. Captain Kang brought them into orbit and immediately began sensor sweeps. Radiation levels are worse than reported, he said grimly. Atmospheric toxicity is climbing. Surface temperature is fluctuating between -80 and +120 degrees Celsius. Can the ship get closer? Taemin asked. Not safely. We'll have to use a shuttle to get you to the surface. But even that can't stay planetside for long in these conditions. Taemin suited up in the modified environmental suit. It was bulkier than the standard Academy suits, with additional shielding and life support systems. Suman attached medical monitors to his skin before he sealed the suit. These will transmit your vital signs constantly, she explained. If I see anything dangerous, I'm pulling you out, whether you like it or not. Fair enough, Taemin said. The shuttle descent was rough. The planet's atmosphere was unstable, throwing them around like a toy. When they finally touched down on a landing pad near the colony's main entrance, Taemin could see the damage immediately. Entire sections of the facility had collapsed. Power conduits sparked and sputtered. The air shimmered with heat distortion. The emergency shelters are in the lower levels, Hana said through the comm. You'll need to go through the main processing center to reach them. Taemin stepped out of the shuttle. Even through the suit, he could feel the hostile environment. The radiation alarm on his wrist display was already flashing yellow. He started walking toward the entrance. The processing center was a maze of corridors and chambers, most of them now exposed to the toxic atmosphere. Taemin's suit computer highlighted a path to the emergency shelters, but it passed through areas where the environmental seals had completely failed. Radiation is spiking. Suman's voice came through his helmet. You're at the edge of what the suit can handle. Understood, Taemin said. He kept moving. The first shelter held 7 miners, a mix of species he didn't recognize. They were weak, but alive, their own emergency suits barely functioning. Taemin helped them to their feet and guided them back toward the shuttle. The path slightly easier now that he knew the way. The second shelter was deeper, in a section where the temperature had soared to dangerous levels. The suit's cooling system struggled to compensate. Taman felt sweat pouring down his face. His radiation exposure was climbing into the red zone. "Taman, your cellular activity is spiking," Suman said, her voice tight with worry. "I'm seeing accelerated metabolic processes. Your body is compensating for the radiation, but I don't know for how long." "I'll be fine," Taman said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. He found 8 more survivors and led them out. The third shelter was the worst. To reach it, he had to cross through a section where the hull had breached completely. The toxic atmosphere poured in, overwhelming his suit's filters within seconds. The radiation levels were off the scale. The temperature dropped to -70 in an instant. His suit alarm screamed. On the ship, he knew Suman was watching his vitals do impossible things, but he could hear the survivors on the other side of that breach, calling for help. Taman took a deep breath and ran. The toxic atmosphere burned his lungs even through the suit's compromised filters. The radiation felt like insects crawling under his skin. The cold made every movement stiff and painful, but he reached the other side, found the shelter, and got the survivors moving. Getting them back across the breach was harder. They were slower, weaker, more vulnerable than he was. Taman had to make 3 trips, carrying 2 survivors at a time, his body screaming in protest with each journey. On the last trip, his suit finally gave up. The seals failed. The filters stopped working. The heating system went dark. For a moment, Taman was exposed directly to Korath 7's lethal environment. He should have died instantly, but his body refused to give up. He felt his cells shifting, adapting, compensating in real time. His lungs processed the toxic air. His skin absorbed the radiation. His core temperature regulated itself. It hurt. Everything hurt. But he was alive. He got the last survivor to the shuttle and collapsed on the deck. Suman was on him immediately, running scanners, shouting orders. Someone stripped off his ruined suit. The shuttle lifted off, racing back to the Time's Horizon's Edge asterisk. Taman lay on a medical bed, watching the ceiling spin. His body felt like it was on fire, but the pain was already fading. His cells were repairing damage faster than it should be possible. He could feel it happening, like a tingling sensation spreading through his entire body. Suman leaned over him, her face pale. "Your cellular regeneration is accelerating at rates I didn't think were possible. You're healing from radiation exposure that should have killed you. Multiple times. Did we get everyone?" Taman asked. "All 47 survivors are aboard," Captain Kang's voice came through the speaker. "Thanks to you." Remek appeared at the bedside, his 4 arms all reaching out as if he wanted to help but didn't know how. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Or the stupidest," Jiwan added, but she was smiling. Hana just shook her head. "I recorded everything. Your exposure levels, your body's responses, all of it. The Academy is going to lose their minds when they see this." Taman closed his eyes. His body was still adapting, still healing, still proving that humans were far more resilient than anyone had believed. He had come to the Galactic Academy to learn, but today he had taught them something instead. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Academy had never been so crowded. Every seat was filled, and beings stood in the aisles and along the walls. Holographic observers from across the galaxy floated in designated spaces, their presence transmitted from distant worlds. The news of what happened on Korath 7 had spread through the galactic community like a shockwave. Taman sat in a small waiting room adjacent to the hall, listening to the muffled sound of thousands of voices. He had spent the past week recovering, though his body had healed far faster than any doctor expected. The physical scars were gone within days. The psychological impact of what he had experienced would take longer to process. The door opened and Ambassador Sora Nam entered. She was Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, a diplomat with decades of experience navigating alien politics. She looked tired but determined. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Nervous," Taman admitted. "Good. That means you're paying attention." Sora sat down across from him. "What you did out there changed everything. The entire galaxy is watching now. Some with admiration, some with fear, and some with greed. Whatever happens in that hall today will define humanity's place among the stars for generations." "No pressure then," Taman said weakly. Sora smiled. "You've already done the hard part. Now, you just have to be yourself." Dean Quorath opened the proceedings, his voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the massive hall. "We gather today to determine the formal classification of humanity and to address the events on Korath 7. This review will shape our understanding and our relationship with Earth's people." Professor Chiron took the central platform first. Holographic displays materialized around her as she spoke, showing the data collected over weeks of research and the dramatic recordings from the rescue mission. "For months, we have studied human biology," she began. "What we initially dismissed as primitive has revealed itself to be extraordinarily complex. The quantum biological architecture present in human DNA represents an evolutionary path we have never documented." She showed comparisons between human cellular mechanisms and those of other species. The differences were stark. Where most species had evolved streamlined, efficient biological systems, humans had evolved redundant, adaptable ones. Most intelligent species arose on what humans would call paradise worlds. Kieran continued. Stable climates, gentle radiation, predictable environments. These species optimized for efficiency. Humanity evolved on a death world, subjected to constant environmental pressure, deadly pathogens, and extreme conditions. They optimized for survival. To Merving. The holographic displays showed Earth, rotating slowly. Annotations highlighted the planet's harsh characteristics. The intense solar radiation, the variable climate, the active geology, the aggressive ecosystem. "Consider their cardiovascular system," Kieran said. "We mocked their singular heart, but that heart is backed by a vascular network so redundant that humans can survive significant damage to it. Consider their immune system, which doesn't simply fight pathogens but learns from them, adapts to them, remembers them across generations through epigenetic mechanisms we are still trying to understand." She pulled up the footage from Korath 7. The assembled beings watched in silence as Taman crossed through lethal environments, his body adapting in real time. When his suit failed and he continued anyway, gasps echoed through the hall. "This is not an anomaly," Kieran said. "This is humanity. Their biology operates on principles of quantum-level adaptation that allow them to survive conditions that would kill any other known species. They are, in the truest sense, apex adaptive organisms." Velthara stood up. The crystalline professor had been quiet since the rescue mission, but now she moved to the platform. For a long moment, she stood in silence, her reflective surface catching the light. "I was wrong," she said simply. The hall fell absolutely silent. "I dismissed human biology as primitive because it did not match the patterns I knew. I allowed my assumptions to blind me to the evidence before my eyes. I formally apologize to Taman Park and to all of humanity for my prejudice." She turned to face the assembly. "I have reviewed the data. I have consulted with colleagues across multiple disciplines. The conclusions are undeniable. Human biology represents not a failure of evolution, but a triumph of it. I am submitting a revised xenobiology curriculum that will properly address humanity's unique characteristics." Another figure rose from the crowd. It was elder scientist Foran, a being so old that his species' name was barely remembered. He moved slowly, aided by floating supports, but his mind remained sharp. "I have witnessed many species join the galactic community across my long life," Foran said, his voice whispery but clear. "Each brings unique perspectives and capabilities. But I have waited centuries to see a species matching the theoretical profile of an apex adaptive species. He activated a display showing ancient theoretical biology texts. Our ancestors theorized about organisms that could thrive in any environment, that could adapt faster than conditions could kill them, that carried within their very cells the quantum machinery to survive anything the universe presented. We thought evolution would never produce such beings, because the energy cost would be prohibitive. But we were wrong, Foran continued. We failed to account for worlds like Earth, where the energy cost of adaptation was less than the certainty of death without it. Humanity is living proof that our theories were incomplete. A debate erupted. Representatives from hundreds of species spoke, some in support, others in concern. A faction led by the Chronosians argued that humanity should be restricted, their expansion into the galaxy limited until their biology was better understood. Another faction wanted to establish research partnerships with Earth, combining human adaptability with galactic technology. Some feared that humanity would outcompete other species. Others saw potential for cooperation and mutual benefit. The arguments grew heated, voices rising in dozens of languages. Dean Quarath finally called for order. We will vote on the formal classification. But first, I believe Taman Park should be allowed to speak. Taman walked onto the platform on shaking legs. Thousands of eyes from hundreds of species watched him. He saw his friends in the crowd. Hana, Jiwon, Sumin, and Rimek, all looking at him with encouragement. He saw Dr. Choi and Professor Kiran. He saw Ambassador Nam, representing his entire world. I came here to learn, Taman began, his voice small at first but growing stronger. I wanted to prove that humans could contribute to galactic civilization. Instead, I became a problem to be solved, an anomaly to be explained, a specimen to be studied. He paused, gathering his thoughts. You laughed at our biology. You called us primitive because we didn't fit the patterns you knew, because we had one heart instead of three, because our neural processing was slow, because we needed oxygen and water and a narrow temperature range. But Earth taught us something you evolved past. Taman continued. Earth taught us that nothing worth having comes without struggle. Every challenge our ancestors faced, every disease, every predator, every climate shift, every disaster, it all left a mark in our DNA. Our biology remembers every adaptation, every survival, every time we refused to give up. He looked out at the assembly. We're not stronger than you. We're not smarter or better. We're just stubborn. Stubborn enough to survive on a world that tried to kill us every single day. Stubborn enough to reach for the stars, even when it seemed impossible. Stubborn enough to help miners on Korath 7, because giving up wasn't an option. I don't want humanity to be feared, Taman said. I don't want us to be restricted or controlled. But I also don't want us to be worshipped or treated as superior. We're just people trying to find our place in a galaxy that's bigger and stranger than we ever imagined. We want to learn from you. And maybe, sometimes, you can learn from us. The hall was silent when he finished. Then Rimek began to clap, the sound of his 4 hands creating a distinctive rhythm. Others joined in, the applause building, until it filled the entire space. Dean Quorath stepped forward. The Academy Council will now vote on humanity's formal classification. The vote was displayed holographically for all to see. One by one, the council members cast their decisions. When the final tally appeared, a new category had been created: Quantum Adaptive Spectrum Biology. Humanity is granted full Academy status, the Dean announced. Their unique biological characteristics are recognized as a valuable contribution to galactic understanding. Earth will be invited to establish formal research partnerships with the Academy, and restrictions on human expansion are lifted. Ambassador Nam stood, tears in her eyes. On behalf of Earth and all humanity, we accept with gratitude and humility. The proceedings continued for hours, establishing frameworks for cooperation and study, but Taman barely paid attention. He had done what he came to do, and more. He had represented his species, and he had shown the galaxy that humans belonged among the stars. 6 months later, Taman stood in a newly established laboratory in the Academy's medical wing. The Institute of Adaptive Biology had been created through a partnership between Professor Kiran and Dr. Choi, dedicated to studying the intersection of quantum biology and practical medicine. A new student, a nervous young being from a species Taman had never encountered, stood in the scanning chamber. The machine hummed, began to glow, then emitted that familiar high-pitched whine and went dark. The student looked terrified. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to break it." Taman smiled, remembering his own fear and confusion in this same situation. "Don't worry. Sometimes the most advanced thing you can be is complicated. Let's figure out what makes you special." The student relaxed slightly. "You're human, right? The one who rescued those miners?" "I'm human," Taman confirmed. "But I'm just a student, like you. We're all here to learn." Through the laboratory windows, he could see Earth ships docking at the station. Hundreds of new human students were arriving, each one carrying their own unique quantum biological signature, each one ready to show the galaxy what humanity could offer. Hana had been promoted to head of human-alien relations. Ji-won was leading a team developing new scanning technology based on human biology. Suman was revolutionizing trauma medicine with techniques adapted from human cellular repair mechanisms. Remek had become humanity's greatest advocate, traveling the galaxy to speak about cooperation between species. Professor Kiran entered the lab, her ancient presence calming as always. "How is our new student?" she asked, telepathically. "Complicated," Taman replied with a grin. "Just like me." "Good," Kiran said. "The universe is complicated. It's time we stopped pretending otherwise." That evening, Taman stood at his favorite spot on the observation deck, watching stars slowly drift by. Velthara approached, her crystalline form chiming softly with each step. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "You taught me to question my assumptions. That is the most valuable lesson a scientist can learn." "You taught me too," Taman replied. "You showed me that even smart people can be wrong, and that admitting it is a strength, not a weakness." Velthara stood beside him in comfortable silence for a moment. "Do you think more species like humanity are out there? Other apex adaptive species we haven't discovered?" "Maybe," Taman said. "The universe is big, full of death worlds and impossible challenges. If Earth could produce humans, who knows what else is possible?" "A terrifying thought," Velthara said, but she was smiling. A message arrived on Taman's communicator. It was from Earth, from his family. They had watched the entire assembly proceedings broadcast across the planet. His mother wrote that she was proud of him, that the whole world was proud, that he had shown the galaxy the best of what humanity could be. Taman looked out at the stars, thinking about all the humans back on Earth looking up at these same stars, dreaming of coming here. Thanks to what had happened, their path would be easier. They would arrive as equals, as valued partners, as beings whose unique nature was recognized and respected. The galaxy had laughed at human biology. They had mocked and dismissed and underestimated. But in the end, they had learned the same lesson Earth had taught humanity over millions of years of evolution. Survival isn't about being the strongest, or the smartest, or the most efficient. Survival is about adapting, persisting, and never giving up. And humans, shaped by a world that refused to make anything easy, had learned that lesson better than anyone. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. And now, finally, humanity had claimed their place among them. Not through conquest or domination, but by simply being themselves. Complicated, adaptable, stubborn, and wonderfully, impossibly human.